Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today I'm going to be tackling another Rotted request, this time from patron Nicole, who wanted me to watch and review the 1981 movie, The Monster Club. As far as why this movie in particular, Nicole writes, because I saw this with my mom when I was young, and it was one of the first horror movies I introduced my son to. It's a fun, frivolous, typical British anthology that is not too well known and deserves to be. Well, fair enough, Nicole. If you know my channel, if you know me, you know that I do love my British anthologies. I'm a huge fan of the Amicus anthologies. Tales from the Crypt is one of my all-time favorites. Asylum is just right up there with some of the best stuff ever. I've never seen The Monster Club, so hearing about it and that it wasn't an Amicus anthology, but it was still a British anthology, but moreover, the fact that it was made in 1981 kind of made it a little bit of an interesting, concept to me. This has a lot of the old guard in it. It has Vincent Price, John Carradine, Donald Pleasance. It has some really notable names in it, but still, 1981, it kind of seemed like, as far as the British anthology series goes, they had a lot of heyday in the 60s and 70s, but 80s, it's kind of on its way out. And I covered this a little bit in my review of the 1983 movie, House of the Long Shadows, in that we have a lot of these old guard actors, but the age of, at that point, the monsters and ghouls and vampires and is on its way out. It's been firmly at this point replaced by the slashers and the gruesome elements of the more modern 80s or late 70s, early 80s resurgence of horror. And the idea of having this lingering presence of the monsters and the ghouls and so forth was just an interesting idea to me. It kind of felt like, not necessarily refusing to let go, but just passing the torch, the last flicker of the ember that was burning so bright not so long ago. And there's another little bit of a hook in this that kind of interested me a little bit, and that this is based on some of the works from 𝗘𝗾𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗃, and they actually integrated 𝗘𝗾𝗵𝗃 as a character in this, because the binding storyline is Vincent Price is a vampire who runs across and sucks some of the blood from 𝗘𝗾𝗵𝗃, the horror author, played by John Carradine in this case.
You are the great 𝗘𝗾𝗵𝗃𝗀𝗃, the writer of those magnificent horror stories.
And loves him to pieces. He's a huge fan. He loves his work. And as an apology and as a thank you, he decides that he wants to, if you want to write more, I can give you some great material just around the corner. There's a monster club where we all get together and socialize. So there'll be plenty of material there for you to use in your next novel. And so they go. And the concept of this hangout spot for all sorts of poorly made up monsters was just a fun little kitschy thing that Vincent Price played up and was very hammy about all the way through. So then we get introduced to the concept of the different types of monsters when humans mate with ghouls, mate with vampires, mate with human ghoul vampire breed. All sorts of different, branches of the tree of monsters and so forth going down.
A werewolf and a ghoul would produce a were-ghoul, but a vampire and a ghoul would produce a vam-ghoul. A were-ghoul and a were-vamp would produce a shaddy.
All sorts of weird shit like that. And in between each segment, we go back to the Monster Club where the next segment is introduced. We also sometimes get a little musical number. It feels a little bit dated, but it is fun. This movie was also the last feature-length motion picture directed by Roy Ward Baker, who is also the director of The Vault of Horrors and Asylum, among many other movies and TV shows. And the segments within this, we have Vampire Story, Shadmock Story, and Humgoo Story. And I have to say that I actually enjoyed all of them in their own way. I think one thing that was kind of prevalent in this movie, more than I was expecting, is a sense of cheeky fun. This movie really wasn't afraid to kind of take the humorous approach, take the levity approach, and really just have a lot of tongue-in-cheek silliness to its name. I wouldn't label this to be a straight horror comedy, but the comedic elements, it doesn't shy away from. It knows what it is. It knows that it's trying to be a silly monster movie in the age when the tide is turning of the horror genre, and just having one last fun little go-around of a fling with vampires and werewolves and so forth before they became passé. The only real caveat that I'm going to put on anything here is if you're trying to expose somebody to some classics, if you have a horror fan in your household or in your friendship circle that does not want to watch classic horror or doesn't think that there's any merit to it, let's just say that. I don't really follow the gatekeeping principle of, you're not a real horror fan unless you've seen blah. However, I do think more people should be exposed to the classics. And in that vein, if somebody has been resistant to it and they are willing to allow themselves to be exposed to some classic horror, fine. Change my mind. Show me what you got. Show me from the 60s, 70s, or 80s. I would say that this might not be the best one. Just because it is so tongue-in-cheek and so silly, I think that it doesn't do a fair representation for a lot of the films of the era and probably wouldn't hold up as a classic horror argument breaker on its own. But for those of you that are willing to take chances on classical horror and are like me and you love the Anthology series of the yesteryear, I would say that this would absolutely be a must-watch for including in your Letterboxd watch list. And on that basis, more than any other, I'm very happy that Nicole recommended the 1981 movie The Monster Club to me. I'm very glad that I watched it. It was a fun, silly, campy little romp that I'm very glad Nicole recommended to me. So thank you once again, and thank you out there for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.